Missed last week's Tuesday treasure. In fact, I might have missed 2 weeks. These are so hard. So I figured out what you have to do is record them ahead of time and then act like they're live. So here we go. Fishing. A rumination about fishing from the fall of '02. Hey, that's nearly 20 years ago. When I say fishing, a lot of you think of a rod and reel, but I started out my career with hand lines. Have you all seen hand lines? It's a pretty stout piece of twisted line. You have a, oh, I just lost that. You just wrap your line around. You tie your spinner on the end. We used a little red and white MEPS spinner, and we used these when we were fishing for mackerel out the back of our boat. So there's my show and tell. I could spend the rest of my life fishing. It's a profitable hobby now. When you catch fish, you actually become self-sufficient. Between fish and tomatoes, I think a person could derive all the nutrients necessary for a healthy lifestyle. Well, we could add in squash, potatoes, beans, and peppers from your truck garden, but fish, they are the treat that God must have intended when he said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures." Fish surround Cape Cod. The humpbacks and fin whales come to feast on the sand eel, or sand lance, a slender bait fish about 5 inches long that like to live in the sandy seabeds, but also crowd into large schools or balls. These schools are easy pickings for the bubble nets created by pairs of humpbacks when they are feeding. The bluefin tuna is a majestic fish that's been plentiful in recent years. Witness this account from Captain Michael Eichenseer from the summer of '98. Seeing bluefin chasing mackerel out of the water and clearing the waves by 5 feet was not an uncommon sight. 4 and 5 foot tuna weighing upwards of 200 pounds or more shot out of the water time and again, showing off their speed and power. They fed like this as close as 3 miles off Nauset Beach all during August and September. I even found them feeding and jumping a half mile off the breakers on some days, and occasionally within 30 feet of my boat. From CapeCodOutdoors.com, bluefin. My fishing expeditions were not nearly as spectacular, but were very eventful for a kid learning the ways of the sea. The highlight of the summer fishing season was always a trip down Bumps River in Centerville in Sam Nickerson's boat to chase the elusive striped bass. A bluefish was just as welcome on the lures that we dragged behind the trolling boat. These lures usually had a piece of pork rind to make an enticing smell and a white flash to attract the fish. Pork rind is also the toughest substance on earth, seldom ever lost from a hook, but be sure to remove it immediately when you return, or the salty, crusted lump will ruin the hooks on the lure. On most occasions, we would make a trip out of Sesuat Harbor in East Ennis in our small lapstrake-sided wooden fishing boat, powered by a very old green Johnson 10-horse outboard motor. The smell of the two-cycle exhaust from these outboards was always intoxicating to me. Once off the end of the jetty at Harbor's Mouth, we began trailing hand lines. You remember, right? With mackerel spinners. Our favorite was a MEPS and had a red and white feather with a treble hook and a tiny silver shiny bauble that would flash when dragged through the water. Our first job was to look for the birds. Where the gulls were feeding on shiners, we could be fairly certain that mackerel were also present. As we came upon this feast, we could often see the bait fish jump clear out of the water and flash in the sun as bigger fish chased them. Mackerel also lived in schools and can make a wave of their own on the surface when chasing this bait. Drive your boat through that wave and you're guaranteed to hook a fish on every line trailing behind the boat. The challenge then is to get all the fish aboard without tangling the lines or the propeller. Some days when the bait wasn't quite as prevalent, we could troll for hours without a bite. My dad usually sat in the back of the boat with his hand on the outboard throttle tiller. If I dozed off, he would reach over and give my hand line a few tugs. I would instantly become alert, holler, "I got a bite," and start reeling in the hand line, hand over hand. I discovered that I'd been fooled when I saw the smile on his face. There were 2 other fish that were favorites. If you anchor right at the mouth of Sesuat Harbor, you can fish for the most delicious of fish, the flounder. Seaworms make the best bait for this fish. You dig the seaworms when you go clamming and keep them alive in a bucket of seaweed. The one problem with seaworms is they bite when you try and put them on the hook. There's no problem knowing when you first hook a flounder, but then he seems to go limp, and you wonder if he got away. A fish playing possum? Then when you get him near the surface, he seems to be able to plaster himself to the bottom of the boat. That last couple of feet has seen many a flounder escape before being landed. The final fish in our repertoire was the tautog. Tautog Rock is just north and west of the mouth of Seward Harbor in Cape Cod Bay and was always a key landmark for our mackerel fishing grounds. Anchoring near Tautog Rock and casting a line in where the fish hang out was a nice change of pace after the hours of trolling for mackerel. American tastes seem to have gone towards the rather tasteless and dry codfish. The bluefish and mackerel are known for their dark flesh and slightly oily texture. Freshly cleaned, baked in breadcrumbs, and served with new red potatoes, they become a treat like no other seafood delight I can recall. The fish stew that can be made the following day with the leftovers from the baked dinner is equally delicious. Hope you enjoyed this rumination about our fishing in Cape Cod Bay.